Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Colin Campbell. I'm the VP of Marketing at GAN Integrity, and super excited to bring together this webinar titled The Sign of Four. And I'll get to that in a moment, which we're going to delve into the areas of signals, data, and decisions when you think about compliance, ethics, and third-party risk programs. So just a few housekeeping notes on the webinar. You will receive a recorded version of the webinar via email at the conclusion of the event. Please, we encourage you to use the question box to ask questions of the speakers, and we will answer live if we have time or at the end of the webinar, and we will certainly follow up if we can't get to everyone's questions. In a brief disclaimer just about the views and opinions of the webinar as well. So, why the sign of four? One, I'm delighted to be joined by Karen Moore and Tom Fox, and I'll bring them up in a moment to introduce themselves. But earlier in the year, we worked with Tom to sponsor his amazing book, The Game is Afoot in Compliance, and really starting to think about how we can apply Sherlock Holmes and his investigation approach, his style, his partnership with Dr. Watson, and thinking about that in today's world when we think about ethics, risk, and compliance. And so we kicked this off. I was lucky enough to spend time with Tom and Karen in London when we kicked this whole series off with the Hound of the Baskervilles, when we got into the topic of third-party risk management. But today we're going to look at the sign of four, which is one of the four books that Arthur Conan Doyle authored with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson as the main characters. And these two people just so operated and worked together in perfect harmony between that logic and that human behavior. So let's get started. And I'd love to just ask Karen and then Tom just to briefly introduce yourselves before we get started.
Thanks, Colin. After 20 years of working in compliance in 4 different companies in 4 different industries, I founded Sounding Board Compliance, which provides advisory services to compliance officers, executive teams, and boards. I'm also very happy to have joined the board of GAN Integrity and impressed that GAN thought to bring a former chief compliance officer onto its board. So thank you very much, Colin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Fox. I'm the founder of the Compliance Podcast Network. I eat, drink, think, pontificate on all things compliance. I do podcasts, I write blogs, I write books. I get to work with cool people like Karen. And let me say a word about the disclaimer. My company, the Compliance Podcast Network, stands 100% behind everything I say. And I, Tom Fox, stand 100% behind everything my company says. So you may be rest assured that if Tom Fox says it, the Compliance Podcast Network will stand behind it. So, Karen, with that.
Well, I was.
So, first of all, why Sherlock Holmes? Why Sherlock Holmes in 2026? And why the novels? I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I read all 56 short stories. And then I ended up doing a podcast series on all 56. And there are 4 novels, of which The Sign of Four is one of the 4. And I looked at those novels and I realized they were a great series of lessons for the 2026 compliance practitioner and professional. Now, Colin mentioned The Hound of the Baskervilles. Certainly that's the most famous, been made into several different movies over the years. And we did a live webinar in London, which was incredibly well received, around investigative lessons from the Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, today I wanted to take a little bit different turn around an equally favorite story of mine, The Sign of Four. One, it's where Dr. Watson meets his wife, Mary. So you got to love a rom-com, even from Sherlock Holmes. So that's great. But the story itself is a wonderful detective story or a mystery. But even more intriguing to me is the role of data and data analytics, pattern recognition. As I read through all of the Holmes stories, I began to see His brain allowed him to see patterns where others couldn't. Well, that's what data analytics does. And I have another friend who had the greatest phrase. He says, data analytics gives me the ability to see patterns and rake leads. And that's what Sherlock Holmes could do in his brain. And that's what I want to bring forward to talk to you today about the sign of 4 as a story and the data analytics and compliance strategies that I see. So could we go to the next slide, please? So this represents the digital haystack or the Holmesian imperative and what you and I might see if we looked at the data. And if you want to take an example from the AML world, how many daily suspicious activity reports does Citibank have? Millions, probably. Are they illegal? Absolutely not. Do they show illegal conduct? Absolutely not. It's SAR, it's a suspicious activity report of anything above a certain dollar amount. It's $5,000 of a wire transfer. That is flagged and put in a system. Now, I'm sure if not millions, hundreds of thousands per day. No human can go through all of those numbers. And no human can go through all of the data that your company generates. Remember, data analytics is not new. It was mentioned in a SEC FCPA enforcement action in 2026 for the first time called Key Energy, where they called out the company should have used data analytics for its set of facts. But in 2020, the Department of Justice, for the first time, said in the 2020 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs, now we're on the 2024 edition, but they said the chief compliance officer and the compliance function must have access to all data across the organization. So data silos are one of the great bedevilments of organizations. And certainly it was a bedevilment for compliance as well, getting access to that. But the DOJ said, no, you have to have access. So the DOJ recognizes, at least as far back as 2020, and back even further, we can even point to our colleague Andrew McBride, who went through an FCPA enforcement action and built a data analytics platform around that. So the DOJ has been looking at this for a long time, but these two pictures, or this screen, shows what you might see if you're a compliance officer and you have a digital haystack of information. And what if you get a spreadsheet of transactions where you get the amount, you get the date? Okay, what does this mean? You may not know, and it may be literally thousands of these that you have to go through. So what technology does, what data analytics does, is not tell you you have a violation. It does not tell you that you have a code of conduct, a conflict of interest violation. It does not tell you have a code of conduct violation. And it certainly does not tell you you have an FCPA violation. But it does flag an anomaly. And what's an anomaly? An anomaly is anything you set. So I'll use the example, is it below A or above Z? And if it is, that's an anomaly. And all data analytics is going to do is pull that and tell you, or you can set it aside for further investigation. So could we go to the next slide, please?
Before we get there, Tom, I just, one of the takeaways, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the point here, is that we are faced with all of this massive amount of data, which creates, even with really improved and enhanced technology, a lot of false positives that a compliance officer has to deal with. But if we can organize that into something which will help us highlight and recognize patterns based on our own understanding of the organization, our own experience with this type of potential misconduct, we're able to hone in. Is that kind of the point? Is almost like an organizational point as a step one?
I think you've hit it right on the head, Karen. And I may actually purloin that because you said it so well. Step one, that's exactly right. This is step one. It tells you, let's set this aside for further investigation with appropriate set of tools and resources, whether that be a compliance officer, whether it be corporate legal, whether it be someone from your internal audit department, whether it be a CFO type, whether it be an internal control specialist. So yeah, step one, that's what this is. This slide begins to show you some of the facts and story behind the case. we had basically a huge treasure stolen in colonial India, and 4 men, that's the 4, were involved in it, and they sold each other out, and they flipped on each other, and the treasure ended up back in England. A major Sholto stole it and brought it back, and his family lived on it for a long time. The other person named in this slide is Jonathan Small, who went to prison over this. And we got out, he was not happy, and he wanted not his share, he wanted it all. There was another gentleman named Mr. Bartholomew, and he died in India during the theft of the treasure. So you see the crisis, and you see the risk that were involved, and then you see the complacency, and Holmes and Watson become involved at the end. It's titled Complacency, but it's around the Sholto family knows something's not right. They're not quite sure what, and they bring in Holmes to help them figure out the mystery and then solve it and protect everyone going forward. Can we move to?
Yeah,
Sure.
Tom, here, first of all, I feel like we could just spend the entire time on this one slide. It has so many implications for compliance, and so does the story itself, which is this kind of complex story. But the thing that gets me here, and I hope you're trademarking this kind of inevitable crisis because it's so breathtaking. How do we as compliance officers kind of show to the executive management or whoever needs to be engaged that this cycle, this loop here is real, that we're not just, crying sky is falling and henny penny running round? How do we show that we're leading to that inevitable crisis, or is that something that we're going to be getting to in the next few slides?
That's actually the beauty of data analytics, because you're bringing data. And I won't pretend to speak for your corporate experience, Karen, but hopefully it's similar to mine, is if I took data to my boss, or to, more importantly, someone in the business unit, because I was in the general counsel's office or the compliance function, that was persuasive to them. Now, the interpretation of the data is a separate question or issue. But if I had data and gave an interpretation of that data, I was at least listened to. And if I could show that where that data was leading, the business unit or the CEO or other senior execs I was reporting to would take that and evaluate it in that manner. So I found that the data part of doing this is incredibly helpful for management to understand what's going on, why there's a need to either further investigate or remediate, and then move forward.
Yeah, it's just that complacency. It's such a comfortable place for an organization to be, and that sort of inertia to recognize that a crisis is looming. That's a kind of a tough one.
Right. So could we move to the next slide, please? So here's some of the evolution of traditional compliance versus the Holmes approach. And so we start with data, and I talked about siloed data. Well, the DOJ has told us you can't have that anymore, and so you need integrated cross-reference ledgers. Your methodology. When I started, your methodology was an audit, a deep dive into a very narrow area. Of course, the problem with that is it could be 3 years after the fact. It could be 12 months after the fact, but it was going to be some time after the fact. It was a detective, not a preventative. Predictive monitoring maps you to baselines and hopefully moves either from straight detective to detective/preventative, or hopefully to preventative. Your communication, one directional training. Now we have really evolved in terms of continuous training, targeted training, bidirectional training, listening to the business unit and finding out what's going on, and then tool sheets. We both have a colleague named Jonathan Armstrong who says Excel is evil, and he has said that for 10 years. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but a manual spreadsheet analysis is circa 2000 now. And machine learning and AI have augmented this so that if you can combine data analytics with an AI, you have a very powerful tool. Next slide, please. So this is the funnel from noise to signal. And this is what I hope every compliance professional, I don't want to say this is the money slide, but this is, in my mind, a great way to think of this. And you may be familiar with the sales funnel, where you start with a very big at the top and it funnels down to a smaller amount at the end. Well, the same goes for data analytics, noise, and noise to signal. You start out with vast amounts of data. You move to a baseline or anomalies, I've called them, in your data analytics. So you have below A and above Z. You have a contextual analysis. You're able to cross-reference the data from various silos. Those silos can be sales. Those silos can be your expense reimbursements. Those silos can be your marketing budget, a discretionary marketing budget that your sales team may have. And if you can put all of those data silos together, then you begin to see patterns. So for instance, is your gift, travel, and entertainment spend, is it higher in one region? Is it higher in a high risk region? Is it higher to government officials? And the same for marketing. The best examples around marketing expenses we've seen are around distributors who are typically given a budget to market because they're a distributor of the company's products. They're a third party, certainly, but there's either a credit or a marketing budget or something. And is there an anomaly or an excess spend in the marketing budget? And then, of course, the human in the loop, but here I've shown it as a diamond because I think that's what we are. We're the diamonds. And that's where the compliance magic happens. That's where the compliance officer's expertise comes in, is sort of putting it all together in a way after having seen these disparate components. Karen, does this resonate with you, or would you look at it in a different way?
No, so much. I think the slide really just visually represents how much we need to create this funnel. And so I would kind of argue that you've got a different diamond or a different gemstone right at the beginning, because what data are we putting in and what are we asking the technology to do to sort it out in a way that provides this kind of insight and an opportunity to narrow it down to something manageable. Well, not just manageable, but insightful. And leading then not just to detecting patterns that inform potential misconduct for investigation, but starting to detect patterns that inform the potential for misconduct that allows us to do what we do best, which is anticipating and designing solutions that mitigate or even prevent future misconduct. So I think this slide is fantastic and gets right to the heart of what we're looking for now as compliance officers, to let us be extremely effective rather than trying to sort through the mess.
Can we move to the next slide, please? So these are a couple of quotes. The smallest point may be the most essential. Holmes has some great lines throughout, and that's certainly one of those. Fraud usually doesn't announce itself. There's a fraud triangle that we'll talk about in a little bit, but it can be subtle. It can be a transactional value outside the normal parameters. If you have a contract with a major South American energy concern, you may have a contract that is $2 billion. Well, how are you as a compliance officer going to understand that a value of an expenditure under that contract is outside the norm? Because you can hide a lot in $2 billion. That's why data analytics can be so powerful.
Tom, we've got a question that's come in, I think from somebody who's starting to hyperventilate a little bit, asking how do we create all of this, take all of this extra material that maybe we haven't even been looking at. How do we do all of this without generating even more work that becomes even more taxing on our limited resources?
Well, if you think back to the prior slide, Karen, where the funnel actually goes down. So certainly you're going to start with a lot of data, but if you could put that in a data analytics tool, whatever tool you might choose to use, it's going to narrow that down. And that hopefully by the end, it will be an amount that is manageable, but at least it'll be a finite amount. And if it's an amount that's not manageable, what you do is you begin to risk rank. And it's like a risk assessment. I've discovered 10 things. Well, let's now rank them in terms of risk. Is it a high risk jurisdiction? Is it a governmental entity? What's the product? What's the service? Are there tariff obligations? You know, whatever ranking you want to put in place. But then what you're looking for is a discrete group, and then you risk rank and then triage, and you move forward in your investigative process.
And then do we get back to that kind of, gems at the very beginning to just start to fine tune the algorithms and the process that we're using to make it more accurate, more targeted?
If you're using AI, the answer is yes. And if you'll think back to Matt Galvin, which back when he was with AB InBev and developed their data analytics tool that he was very open about sharing to the compliance community, he did exactly that. He started off with a couple of modules, expanded those modules, but the modules learned and from information that was inputted. So it was a continually learning process for each module that AB InBev created for their compliance program or using data analytics. Next slide, please. So here's another way to think about it, rhythms of normalcy. Do you look at an annual rhythm? Do you only look at the top producers and their discretionary bonuses at the end of the year? Or do you look at it on an ongoing basis? Maybe 3 to 5 years ago, you looked at it at an annual basis, but now I think not only do you have the tools to look at it on an ongoing monitoring basis, but you may now have that responsibility. So what are the rhythms of sales in your organization? So if I can draw on my professional background, I'm a lawyer. And for 25 years, I was a trial lawyer. Well, there was a rhythm to trials. No trials in the summer. Trials started September 1. So September 1 till 2 weeks before Christmas, you're going to be very busy. A week after January 1, trials started up again. They were very busy till sort of March, which was school spring breaks. And then that rhythm. But is there a rhythm in your sales cycle? If you're a public company, quarterly reporting, at least right now, may be the rhythm that you're tied to. I have been in corporations, and I certainly understand quarterly reporting. I understand the pressure to get sales done, but there's an equal amount of pressure to report the results. So at Halliburton, we had 24 hours where the senior execs wanted the numbers for that month. So everybody was under pressure. It wasn't just the salespeople. It wasn't the law department cranking out contracts. It was the CFO and all of their staff doing the numbers. Well, what we all started doing was doing an ongoing monitoring. So on day 21, where were we? But also on day 28, if it was a 28-day month, or day 31, whichever it was, we weren't looking back over 31 days and recreating something from nothing. We had ongoing numbers that we could report on a timely basis. So the rhythms of how your organization works, both sales, and here we've got up HR activities. Do you have to bring in people around times of the year? Do you have to bring in people around major projects? How long lead time do you have to do that? What about your third parties? That's going to take some amount of time. So, and then of course I talked at some length about financial transactions and quarterly reporting. But if you begin to see anomalies in this rhythm, like everything goes up, well, is it going up because it's the end of the month, or more importantly, the end of a quarter? That might be a normal rhythm for your company if you're a public company. If you're not a public company, perhaps you have a different rhythm. So all data can also give you these rhythms, so that something spikes and any one of these, your sales rhythm, your HR, or your reporting, you can at least ask the question why.
Yeah, to me, this really goes to the heart of the importance of the compliance team really understanding the business so that they can hear that heartbeat and sort of instinctively almost detect some sort of anomaly, then aided by actual data. And here at the bottom of the slide, you use the analogy of a wrong note in a song. What happens when the song changes and the regulatory environment shifts, the corporate focus shifts, there's some financial pressures or competitive pressures? How do you use a baseline when you've got a kind of shifting normal?
Absolutely. So it just gives you a different way to look at it, and I think a more comprehensive approach as well.
Mm.
So could you go to the next slide, please? So silos, I've mentioned, I started with silos early. Here's an example of silos: vendor records, financial transaction, employee access logs, however many types of data in your corporation, that could be the number of silos. It could be marketing, it could be gift, travel, and entertainment, GTE. It could be discretionary spend, whatever it is. And while a single transaction might appear fine or legitimate in isolation, when you look at everything and can put the context around it, that's when you can begin to see these patterns. So it's breaking the silos gives you a contextual analysis. Next
on
slide.
this one, Tom, we have a question that came in, not specifically to this slide, but to an earlier slide, and I think it relates here too, which is, if predictive analytics are the holy grail, what do you do when other functions are reluctant to share their data?
Well, the beauty of this, Karen, is that it is not simply data for compliance. The beauty of it is, if you have better compliance, you have more efficient business processes and you're more profitable. And that will always persuade senior executives. If you can take something to them and show it's going to increase our ROI, it's going to increase our profitability, guess what? They're going to say adopt it. And so different disparate groups may be reluctant to do so. One, we have the DOJ saying, well, you have to. But two, the business case, I have a colleague named Carl Hahn, and his first question is, what's the business case? What's the business use? And what's the business case for this? And every time I've looked at it, I found there's a huge business case. And if I could give you the best example I ever saw, was company thought they had excessive GTE spend in a high-risk jurisdiction. So they looked at the spend of every salesman. And what they found was there was actually a range of GTE spend. And by that, I mean gifts, travel, and entertainment. So lunches, dinners, things like that. And it was for high-risk government employees. So definitely FCPA implications. But what they found was, it turned out you had to spend some amount of money to make a sale. But if a spending got too far, it was clear the recipient of the gifts, travel, and entertainment was not going to sign a contract. So you had this incredible anomaly of, there was a range of spend. You had to spend some amount of time on the customer. But if you started spending too much, it was clear the customer was not going to sign a contract. So the company decreed you had to spend at least A, but you couldn't spend more than Z. And they thought the sales team would go nuts. Well, it turned out the sales guys loved it, because that range gave them a metric. And they knew once they started getting close to that metric, if they didn't close to the metric, if they didn't close the deal, probably they weren't. And if they went over that Z point metric, they just went to the next customer or went to the next deal. And so, and that was not what the compliance team was expecting to find. But those are the sorts of insights you can get that, and I really have tried to emphasize this for at least 10 years, more effective compliance equates to more efficient business processes. And that's what gives you greater ROI and greater profitability. So by using these patterns, you're going to have data which can demonstrate more efficient business processes for your organization. And that's what will persuade senior executives to allow you to do this.
Yeah, I think that that's something that is such a big learning for compliance teams, as we tend to think in this kind of linear fashion. And with the business, we have to start at the end. What's the end result? What is this going to get you? If you do A, you're going to get B.
Right.
It's a good learning. Thanks, Tom.
Next slide, please. Okay, this ties us a little bit back into the story and to the fraud triangle of pressure, opportunity, rationalization. Here we have pressure. Captain Morstan. Captain Morstan was the father of Mary Morstan. Mary Morstan was the Mary of Dr. Watson and Mary Watson. So that's where he comes in. And he had huge gambling debts, as did Major Sholto. And so there's your pressure. Then we had our archetype criminal, Mr. Small, who was betrayed, and then his rationalization became the betrayal. And so he was essentially disgruntled employee within the four-person group. And then Major Sholto in later years, he was trying to cover everything up because of the fear of being killed. Now, he died of a heart attack, but he died of the heart attack because Jonathan Small was hanging around and he knew what was coming. So the modern equivalent is hiding small operational errors, but they can pretty quickly mushroom out into bigger problems.
Tom, how does this fit into what we've been talking about? And if you're using some sort of machine learning, how do you roll in these catalysts, the psychology, this kind of pressure?
So pressure, opportunity, rationalization. That's the fraud triangle. And if you have all of those sort of green, you have a situation where fraud could arise. So what if you have pressure but no opportunity? What if you have robust internal controls, or someone's actually watching the GTE spend? Well, the opportunity goes away. And the rationalization, hopefully you have not only hired people who believe in doing business ethically and in compliance, but you've continued to reemphasize that psychological message with both messages from management, tone at the top, but also in your training going forward. So it's a variety of tools to try to stop or break the pattern.
And so do you see that you can use machine learning to kind of identify these patterns and then provide some sort of opportunity, hopefully early on the pressure side, to really pinpoint where pressures are going? Is that what you're seeing?
Well, if the pressure typically is an individual employee's pressure, whether that pressure is, as with Captain Marston, with gambling debts, or a lifestyle that may be too great for the salary they make, or the internal pressure to succeed and the internal pressure to hit your numbers every quarter. Mm-hmm. If you can take those away or moderate or ameliorate those, it can take that pressure away.
So it's asking the right questions of the data to try and get at the heart of this. Tough.
Next slide, please. So the policy filter. Karen and I have both spent many, many moons on policies. And policies, as a lawyer, I love a policy. But I have to remember, I'm not writing a policy for me. I'm writing a policy for employees. And so having a policy that the employee who wants to do the right thing and goes and reads the policy, tries to interpret it, and then their conduct flows from that is a critical role for every compliance professional. It's still a critical role in 2026. So having a policy in place, you've got the details, try to eliminate inconsistency, and don't write it by lawyers for lawyers is the simplest thing I can say. But the key is, if an employee has a question, they trust you enough to raise their hand. And they trust you because, one, you're going to answer their question. Two, you're going to give them an answer. Three, they're not going to be viewed negatively, or there's not going to be any sort of connotations, negative connotations for them. So I think the policy filter is still something we probably don't talk enough about, but it's worth, in my mind, saying a few words. And if someone misinterprets a policy, you should be there to help them, not sanction them.
It's just another great pattern recognition opportunity as well. If you're looking at the root causes of misconduct and they trace back to either an ambiguous term or a misleading term, or something that's very clear which has been specifically misinterpreted, you've got a whole range of opportunities to improve your situation.
Next slide, please. So your communication strategies. Yes, communications are a part of data analytics. Now, do communications inform data analytics, or do communications follow data analytics? I might suggest it's actually a little bit of both, because you have to have an adaptive communication strategy, but it is multiple layers and multiple lines within your organization. It all starts at the top of it: senior leadership, executive leadership, strategic alignment, focusing on big picture, culture, tone at the top, saying the right things, more importantly, doing the right things. If you want to go full Texan, you say you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. Whatever you want to say about it, it is examples of senior leadership. So technical specialists, I and we as a compliance professional are tasked with providing targeted training. So you might not think the AP clerk approving gifts, travel, and entertainment needs anti-corruption compliance training, but you may find that your AP clerk reviewing a gift, travel, and entertainment spend can identify something that's above or below the range which someone has discretionary capability for. They have $150. Well, they said, well, the tip went over. That doesn't count. Well, when you have an AP clerk that flags that, that might be exactly what you want, but you're not going to get the AP clerk to flag that unless you've given them targeted training for what their job is and explain to them why their role in AP may be a part of a much bigger picture, but they're an important part. So technical specialists can be the chief compliance officer, it can be the general counsel, it could be the compliance function, it can be the internal audit people, but it can be a variety of different people in your organization. And if you take the time to give them targeted training and, equally importantly, explain their role in the bigger picture, my experience has been not only will they embrace it, they'll appreciate it because they think you paid attention to them in a way that no one has before. And so frontline implications, what's it mean for the business people? And give them, I think, step-by-step guides and clear action. And if you can give them scenario-based training, that's, I think, what they want. Short espresso shots of communication are another way to phrase it. So I advocate really a much broader range of communication strategy. Once again, it can be informed by the data, or in the case of AP, perhaps it does inform the data. So you have some thoughts one way or the other, Karen?
Yeah, training is always the tough one, because if you don't make it relevant to what people are doing and give them something that will help them do something differently at the end than they were doing at the beginning, you've kind of lost them, and people roll their eyes, and it becomes a burden rather than an assist. So I love breaking it down into these different categories and making sure that you're remaining relevant, but also that the kind of the way that you were providing the information makes the most sense and is most actionable to these different groups.
Next slide, please. So the training evolution, a few more thoughts on training. When we both started, you got an annual training. You may have gotten a 10-question exam at the end. Hopefully you passed it. You were done for the year. Now we've really moved to a much more continuous type of training. I mentioned in the last slide, espresso shots of training, ongoing communications. Deep and near and dear to my heart would be, do you have a podcast around compliance? But you can do short communication bursts with AI and other tools that are available. If someone has to book a business travel, you might they may get a reminder on your company's facilitation payment policy. You may get a reminder of you're going to a high-risk jurisdiction. You have your shot card in order. You may get a variety of reminders that can be short, sweet, and targeted to that event or that type of action you're about to take. And so we've really evolved into almost a continuous training, but it's not really training, it's communication. And I think that if you can have a regular short micro-learning type situation where employees can look at problems, maybe it's one problem, maybe it's one issue, It just gets them to think about it, and hopefully they'll remember it, or at least remember to raise my hand and call compliance.
Yeah, I love that kind of prompt and that nudge idea that I think is Sonnenschein sort of created, and Todd Howe talks about quite a bit, which is that just-in-time nudge to put people into the right decision making, make that decision easier to take at the moment it needs to be taken. So yeah, fantastic. The other thing too, I think, is I like to bury some short compliance training into other training that is clearly welcome and clearly relevant. How do I use this machine? How do I create this this file? It becomes then part and parcel of somebody's activity during the day.
Next slide, please. So crisis communication. With Sherlock Holmes, he always values the truth and precision above speed, and he believes hastily informed messages during a crisis could cause more damage. Sometimes you don't have the opportunity to completely investigate a matter, and that time frame has been compressed by the Department of Justice, and this administration has made it very clear that they expect you to self-disclose in a very quick manner. Now, many people remember the Cognizant Technologies case where the board made a self-disclosure in 2 weeks. I think we've sort of evolved back to that. That does not mean you can do a slipshod investigation. That does not mean you have to guess. What it does mean is it puts pressure on the compliance professional when an incident or issue comes in to correctly triage it or accurately triage it and get it to someone who can do a very effective investigation. Now, that might be professional law firms who specialize in external investigations. You may work with people like that. Perhaps you have an internal team, but you're going to have to make a very quick assessment, because that's the key under this administration to moving into self-disclosure, to moving into the voluntary self-disclosure policy, which makes you eligible for a declination. And that's the goal if you find something. So are you ever going to have the complete picture? No, I'm not even going to say probably not. You're not. But you have to get a clear understanding of your knowns and unknowns. You have to try to figure out, at least in your mind, is it a violation? And then how are you going to continue the investigation after you self-disclose, because then you'll have government oversight. So I think we, Karen, as a profession, have much more greater pressure on us now. I think the professionals we work with, including external law firms and forensic types, also have much more pressure on them to get it right, but get it quickly assessed so you can make the decision, are we going to self-disclose? Because the benefits of self-disclosure can be extraordinary all the way to a declination.
But Tom, let me ask you to kind of put on an old hat, because you've been not just in the compliance seat, but also in the general counsel seat. What happens when compliance and the compliance officer and the general counsel disagree on this kind of the speed, when to self-disclose, or even if to self-disclose? How does that conflict get resolved?
So remember, there's no legal obligation to self-disclose. So you're not violating the law by not self-disclosing. Now, you may violate the law if you've discovered conduct and allow that conduct to continue. But if you stop the conduct and remediate, that's legally, I think, what your obligation is. So I don't want any compliance professional to think, I made a recommendation, the GC has gone the other way, we are now violating the law. No. The question is, are you going to self-disclose? I've been in a situation where GC disagreed. I've been in a situation where the general counsel agreed. I've been in a situation where the president disagreed with me as the GC. And in that latter situation, I took it to the board, and the board made the decision. But when you have the GC and compliance officer agree, then someone other than them is going to make that decision. and that can be either the president of the company, CEO, or the board chairman or an appropriate committee of the board. But I want to emphasize, by not self-disclosing, you're not violating the law. So that's kind of how I think through it. Okay, can we have our next slide, please? So, pillars of excellence. And once again, this is a big picture. This is another one of the money shots. The method, message, mind, and morals. The method is your investigation. Your message is your communications about directives and continuous ongoing monitoring and training. Your mind is your understanding. What are the interventions? What are the behavioral factors? We touched on those a little bit. And then morals, the integrity. This starts literally at the top, and I've said that several times already, but saying you're an ethical company, saying you do business the right way does not end with a once-a-year statement from the CEO. It is continually reinforced. And if you continually reinforce it, people begin to not simply believe it, but live it within your corporation. And it doesn't start with when you become an employee. I advocate it starts in the hiring process. It starts in the interview process. You talk about business ethics as a part of your culture and a part of what you expect from employees. And if you start that in the interview process, and you had several interviews and several people say that, you as a candidate think, these guys are pretty serious about this. Now you get hired and you get onboarded. It's discussed in the onboarding process. It's discussed at every review. Hopefully it's discussed in meetings. So the integrity part, it's non-negotiable. It's doing business ethically and in compliance, but it is continually reinforced. So all of these are a critical part. Data analytics is not the answer in and of itself. And we've said that different ways and from other slides, but this slide says it in yet another way. Data analytics without human understanding yields false positives. That's the human in the loop. That's the role of the compliance professional. So for me, this is a great slide to think through organizational resilience. Okay, next slide. All right, just like those tiny physical clues, insignificant data points can be critical for hidden risks. And this ties us back to my mind, the beauty of data analytics, because the art of detection Sherlock Holmes used is the same art of detection we use now. It's continuous refinement, it's transparency, it is an ethical integrity and building a culture where compliance is not a burden, but a byproduct of operational excellence. Once again, effective compliance equates to greater business efficiency. It's the process of compliance. It's operationalizing compliance. And now with data analytics and AI, you can literally do it at the speed of business. That's what's going to make you a more profitable company. Next slide. Okay. Karen, did any questions come in or anything that we've got a few minutes left to discuss.
Yeah, I want to put you on the spot here a little bit, Tom, to apply so many of the points that you've made, including the 4 M's, which I really like, that pillar slide, to the recent Scholar case. We've all been looking at it. I think there's so many learnings there. There's a big role of data analytics. Could this have been avoided by any of the many topics that you've touched on today? Where did they go wrong?
So Scholar is a absolutely fabulous example of potentially the power of data analytics. And for those who either don't know the case or haven't read it yet, Scholar is a U.S. agricultural company who was bringing in produce across the U.S.-Mexican border. And there was a change in the law in Mexico around the types of inspections that were required to cross the border. And what happens when you have a change in law? Your risks change. So the compliance function missed that change in law because they didn't reassess their risks. And what happened was rather than complying with the increased standards the law required, the company had customs brokers who proposed paying bribes to get agricultural products across the border. So one, we have a missed opportunity with a lack of an updated risk assessment. But when we move into the data analytics, Karen, this case really, in my mind, is incredibly powerful, because here was the bribery scheme. $2,000 bribes were paid, 400,000 total over multiple years. I think it was 6 years. That's a lot of bribes. Now that's the same amount, $2,000. That's anomaly number one. Anomaly number two is they were all described in the same way: reinspection fees. Mm-hmm. What's a reinspection fee? Well, you might think it meant, well, they went back and looked at it again. Fair enough. 2,000 times. So you begin to see something a little bit different. And then the third part of that data component is, what were the customs brokers' services were they providing? Were they facilitating the reinspection fees? Were they going out and showing the alleged Mexican customs inspectors the goods that were being shipped across the border? So we have three different data points. We have a dollar amount, $2,000. Well, actually four. Dollar amount, $2,000. Number of bribes, 2,000. We have a description, reinspection fees, and then we have a service, all data points that no one was looking at. Now, maybe all of those data points were spread across multiple silos. Maybe we had an AP on the $2,000. Maybe we had another function looking at the service descriptions from the brokers. Maybe we had someone in finance coding what the payments were for. And maybe we had yet another group, the supply chain group, for instance, looking at how the customs brokers were doing all of this. So potentially we have 4 or 5 disparate silos. If someone had looked at all of that, because of the consistency of everything, that's an anomaly. Many years ago, I saw a presentation by a guy who's in compliance at DHL, and he had a matrix he had created. His name was James Min, and I called it the Min matrix. And what the Min matrix says was, if you have 100% success at getting your goods across the border, you have a problem. No one has 100% success rate. No one. And it is expected that there's going to be some problem in the paperwork and the goods, whatever it is. And so, and of course, you resolve those problems. But you don't resolve them with bribery or corruption. And so if you have, that's perhaps another metric, they were getting everything through. So you begin to see all of this data. And if someone had looked at maybe each one of those components, but certainly all of those together, it should have been enough to say, we need to take a deeper dive into this, because this is an anomaly or unusual. And so here we are in 2026. Now the case happened from, I think, 2013 to 2019. It was not self-disclosed. It was not clear how the Department of Justice discovered this violation, but here we are 7 years after it ended, and we have an FCPA enforcement action with a deferred prosecution agreement. And to me, this is really one of the best examples I can point to in 15 years of what could have been the power of data analytics, Karen.
100%, Tom. It calls to mind for me your very first slide, which talks about kind of structuring the data in a way that allows you to focus on the anomaly, combined with that whole baseline, establishing those baselines, which would have showed you patterns, and then that that funnel as well, to try and filter out the noise and come out with the what are these regular payments with the same type of characterization, which actually brings in a question that we've been asked. Again, people who are trying to grapple with all the work that's involved here, they're asking, how do you upskill traditional compliance auditors into detectives who know how to ask the right questions of machine learning outputs?
So first of all, I will speak for myself. I will not speak for you. I'm a lawyer by professional training. My math skills are rudimentary or elementary at best. I can add with a calculator sometimes. The data is not my forte. And so what I need is either someone who can look at data and say, Tom, here's something that's anomalous that you might want to look at, or if I can set the parameters, as I've said several times, below A and above Z, I have set an arbitrary standard that I'm going to take a look at anything that is outside A to Z. And I can hopefully then take a deeper dive. I could bring in other experts within the corporation, or if I have to go outside for forensic help. But there are going to be internal resources in a corporation, whether it's in the CFO, whether it's internal audit, or those types of people who can look at things. The next part about asking the questions, I'm going to put that on me. I'm the lawyer. I'm supposed to know the questions to ask, and I feel like I can. But if I am armed with the data and someone can help me understand what does this data mean, I feel like I can ask the right questions to uncover if there's anything askance or not.
Yeah, and to me, that's where combining available technology and systems with your own know-how and understanding becomes critical. And Colin, I think at the risk of, kind of setting you up, anybody who's promising a type of plug and play solution is really overselling and underestimating the amount of work that needs to be done to ask the right questions to set this up for success. It's a challenge. I talked to my clients who are saying that compliance demands have changed over the last few years in terms of your ability to understand and ask the right questions.
Yeah, I agree. And to Tom's point, right, this interlock of many different systems across the business, right? There is no one easy button, right, to make this all come together, right? And I think you said it very well, Tom, about the compliance efficiency, the operation of compliance really needs to elevate up to working with the C-suite, right? Because it creates business performance as well when you have these things connected and you get that data and you get that insight. I think that's great. I know we've almost at time. I think this has just been a fantastic session, and I can't thank you enough, Karen and Tom, for bringing this together. And I'm looking forward, for everyone who's participated. Thank you for the questions. We have 2 more coming up. We've got a study in Scarlet and the Valley of Fear, and both will be equally amazing presentations and giving fresh perspectives on how to think about that and through the lens of Sherlock and Dr. Watson. So again, thank you, Karen and Tom, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.